Well, we're going to be hearing a lot more from Donald Trump in the days to come. The field vying to challenge him in the Republican presidential nomination race is growing. Today, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott filed the necessary paperwork with the Federal Election Commission, and he says he'll make what he calls a major announcement Monday in Charleston. And on Wednesday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is expected to say that he's running. In recent days, DeSantis and the current frontrunner, former President Donald Trump, have been exchanging increasingly pointed barbs. Trump mocked the governor after two DeSantis-backed candidates ended up losing in Tuesday's elections. And on the other hand, the New York Times reported that DeSantis has privately told supporters that Trump can't win in 2024. Carl, what's this race going to look like? And are they going? These are two politicians whose careers have really been intertwined. They're sort of playing in the same lane, going after the same voters.
And Trump would say he made Ron DeSantis
Exactly.
with his endorsement in the Florida governor's race. It's just going to be a very messy battle. I think DeSantis might be happy that other people are jumping into this race, and it sort of might dilute a little bit of the Trump effect on him. I do think that's interesting that other people have seen what's happened, have seen how it's gone with DeSantis, and still say, you know what, I'm willing to jump in there and take on the former president. I do think it's just going to be a free-for-all, though. And, you know, Donald Trump is really great at character assassination, and he's going to apply those skills to Ron DeSantis.
Could what DeSantis is doing, could it work, going after the same voters, sort of trying to be Trumpism without Trump?
Yeah, I think that's his message, right? Trump can't win. I do think there's a lot of Republicans in the Senate who also believe that and are worried about Trump. I do think, though, that you're going to see Trump use this feud that DeSantis has had with Disney against him and say, you know, this guy's not good for business, and try to scare away donors.
Sorry, I mean, yeah, and DeSantis hasn't even launched his campaign yet. You know, as you said, it's expected next week. And he's lost momentum, though. He's lost momentum over the last several weeks, over the last several months, in part because he has not engaged with Donald Trump. And some of his supporters have said, like, jump in already, like, you know, counter. Right, so you know, so there. I think that once that happens, I think after next week, I've been told by some folks in the DeSantis world that will increase, that he will get more vocal towards the former president. But it will turn this cycle, I believe, into a vicious one. It will be a brutal, brass knuckle cycle, and worse perhaps than we've seen since 2016.
How will you say DeSantis is going to get more active? But how will what contrast will he try to draw with President Trump?
Well, I mean, frankly, he has been leaning into this card of being the best person to embody the Trump era policies for the Republican base without having the Trump baggage. I think you're going to see more of that. He's been tweaking him, as we've seen. He's been increasing his criticisms, but at the same time, because of that lack of momentum. As Carl touched upon, we have been seeing more potential contenders, say even this past week, from the mayor of Miami to the North Dakota governor to others, saying they are seriously considering runs and jumping into the presidential fray. And a lot of that is because DeSantis has lost momentum over the last few weeks.
So that's their hope. That's what fuels these sort of long shot candidacies. That's how they think they could win.
Yeah, that, and in part, because they're still, despite of his positioning, of Trump's positioning as this front runner, and I think most national polls, there's an average national polls that show that he's up by 30 points over DeSantis right now, but because there are still these looming investigations, with Jack Smith and the others, Fulton County, that perhaps this trajectory is not sustainable. And so the more they enter into the race, they feel they could change, it could evolve, and they can get a chance. And frankly, and I think a lot of them are relying on that. We'll see what happens.
Turning to the Democratic side, Kayla, Vice President Kamala Harris's profile seems to be rising in recent days. Is there some strategy behind that?
Well, in short, yes, John, because her profile had receded to behind the scenes. Her aides had complained that the issues with which she was tasked were low-profile issues, and she was set up to fail, essentially, because they were issues that were not designed to succeed. Now, in recent weeks, she's taken the helm of the administration's messaging on abortion rights. And in recent weeks, she's also taken the lead on some debt ceiling strategy as well. She was in the meeting with congressional negotiators this week after not being in the meeting last week. She held a briefing for reporters yesterday talking about the consequences of default. And then even today, while she was visiting a philanthropic facility in California, she made comments that made news about the debt ceiling, suggesting that, giving some of the reasons behind the pause. And so the White House has seemed to make a concerted effort to put her out there. And it's because the attacks from the other side are expected to discuss President Biden's age and the fact that Kamala Harris, the vice president, is just a heartbeat away from the presidency. And so her record is expected to come under attack just alongside the president's, and they want that to be unassailable, and they want her to be shown being in the lead, hand in glove with President Biden on a lot of these issues.
The Republicans could be saying she could be president sooner rather than later, given the president's age?
Yes, I mean, that's what they're anticipating the message to be because of the attacks on President Biden's age. And so they're gearing up for that. And even just her appearances in President Biden's ads and some of his high-profile events so far, it's very clear that they're raising her profile to show that she would be an able leader if anything were to happen to President Biden, to try to nip those attacks in the bud even before they start.
Sungmin, the campaign also released a strategy memo. It interestingly listed the states where they thought they can be competitive in 2024. Anything in that memo surprise you?
It was really interesting how they specifically singled out North Carolina and Florida as two states where they will try to be active and play in as compared to the swing states that they laid out that were so successful then back in 2020. Because if you look at the states, a lot of them are very familiar to us, such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona clearly were pivotal states for the president in 2020 and also, frankly, in 2022 as well in the midterms. But North Carolina and Florida caught my eye. Florida for us, when I started covering politics, Florida was a solid swing state. Now it is clearly a red state, considering, especially looking at Governor DeSantis' resounding reelection victory last November. But it is some place where they see at least it's worth investing some money in. And North Carolina is really interesting as well. It is a state where the demographics could be pretty ripe for Democrats to take that state again after losing it to Republicans the last couple of presidential cycles. And I do think that's another state where abortion, which has been such a key issue in the midterms. We just saw the Republican-led legislature override Governor Cooper's veto of a 12-week abortion ban. And that issue is going to be really salient, really relevant for so many states, including so many swing states to come.
Sungmin, you've got the last word because we have to leave it there. Thank you all for sharing your reporting with us, and thanks to all of you for watching.